All right, guys, today we're going to talk about levels of questioning. So far you have done week 1 of your discussion guide where you have to write your summary and your passages and your questions. And after looking over your positive practice that you did with the positive excerpt and the things that you submitted this week for your discussion sheets, one of the things we really just wanted to talk about was how to write good questions. So today we're going to talk about the 3 different levels of questioning. So first, let's talk about why we even need to write good questions. So here's a couple different things just to think about when you're writing good questions. First of all, what will this do for you in the future? It's going to answer questions you have about a text. It's also going to prepare you for real life discussions outside of school. So you'll always be asking questions and answering questions in your everyday life outside of school. If you go on to college, whether it's a 2-year university or 4-year university, you're going to be in classes where you have to ask questions and answer questions. Or if you go into the workforce, again, you are going to have to ask questions and answer questions. With that, you will also help to, or with your questioning, it'll also help you become more confident when speaking and listening. We'll encourage you to read between the lines and ask questions about the writer, the topic, the audience, and other things about the text. It will also force you to interact with people in a cooperative setting, regardless of who they are, which is also a reality of life. So we put you in these random groups. Asking your partner's questions and asking your group to respond to your questions forces you to create that conversation with people that you might not know outside of that group setting. And it also might help you change your mind. So especially when we get to questions of evaluation, those are questions anyone can answer, even if they haven't read your text yet. So those are questions that you might provide feedback on, and then a group member might provide a different perspective, and that might actually either change your mind or just give you a new perspective that you didn't think of before. So let's talk about the 3 different levels of questions. First, we have level 1, which is questions of fact. We have level 2, questions of interpretation, and we have level 3, questions of evaluation. There isn't a type or a level of question that's better than the other. We need all 3 types of questions. But you'll see the differences between them. Level 1 questions are going to be easier to answer than level 2 and 3. Level 2 are going to be a little bit more difficult, and then level 3 are going to take you outside of the text and into the world and into talking about some questions about things we believe. So let's talk more specifically about each level. Questions of facts, level number 1. So these are going to be facts about the story or about the text. So this is going to have only one correct answer. A lot of you on your discussion sheet, I wrote the comment, this is a yes or no question. If it's a yes or no question, it's a question of fact. It can be answered with one answer. It is a yes or it is a no. There is no discussion involved. We can either look at the text or we can give a specific answer to that question. A lot of times these are questions about characters in the text or about actions, about things that maybe we can't remember that can be answered. So we have a couple examples here. Thinking about our 2 stories that we've read so far, we have Here's to Good Friends and the positive excerpt. What does Brad bring to school in a Coke bottle every day? There is a correct answer to that question. We could go to the text, we could find the answer. It cannot be brought up for debate. No one could say, well, I know the text says he brings this, but I actually think he brings this instead. There is only one right answer. Same with the next question. What is Paige's nickname at school? That nickname is defined in the text. You could not argue that she has a different nickname or that that nickname is not correct because we have that answer in the text. There's one correct answer. This does not promote discussion within your group. So again, questions of fact are fine, but not when you're writing discussion questions. So if you come to your group and you happen to be reading the same book as someone else and you need a clarifying question, you could ask your group, hey, I didn't understand this part of the text. If someone's reading the same story as you, they can maybe give you some feedback on that. But that is not a question to bring up for discussion. That is a question of fact. Lowest level of questioning. So next is questions of interpretation. Questions of interpretation are just like they sound. each person might interpret things differently. Okay, we talk about in our annotations, interpretations. Those are things that are not lined out in the text for us. Those are things that we are interpreting. Those are things that we are thinking that are supported by the text, but not necessarily in the text. So we could all come up with different answers. We could all have different experiences that lead us to different reasons we believe something about a character. So again, these are going to have more than one answer. They do need to be supported by evidence in the text. They make you draw on more than one passage, and they require deep thinking. These take time to come up with answers to. So I know some of you on your positive excerpt sheet did have some questions of interpretation where I asked you to elaborate. Where in the text did you find the answer to this question? How did you come up with your interpretation? Okay, so I have a couple examples here. When looking back on the short story, what are some clues to Brad's drinking, and why do you think those details are considered clues? So some of us could argue that when he tripped in class, that was a clue to him drinking. Others of us might say, no, that's not a clue. His shoes aren't tied, so he tripped. Those two things have nothing to do with each other. These are different interpretations of that passage in the text. And then thinking about drawing on more than one passage, we can't just use that one passage to then make the decision that, oh, Brad must be drinking because he tripped. We need multiple other passages that happen throughout the story to lead to that interpretation. Okay? How might our reading of the story have changed if we knew Brad was drinking from the start rather than learning about it in the middle of the story? Question of interpretation, we all might answer that differently. Some might think the story doesn't change at all. Some might think the story changes drastically. And then our last question here is about our positive excerpt. What might have happened if Miss Ward got involved when Paige reached out to her? So in that excerpt, Miss Ward tells Paige to leave, stop causing drama. So what might have happened? How might that the rest of that story have changed if she did get involved? Again, we could all have different answers. Some of us might say it would have gotten drastically worse. Some of us might say nothing would have changed. Everything would have ended the same, just how it did in the story. Okay, so these are questions of interpretation. There's no right answer, but we can use the text to support better answers. We can't come up with something wild that would have no reasoning to support from the text. There needs to be some sort of connection to the passages that we find in the text. And then last but not least, we have questions of evaluation. Questions of evaluation are going to ask how a story or text fits with your own experiences, beliefs, and backgrounds. These questions do not mention characters or events from the story, but instead discuss real-life ideas, experiences, or themes. These questions make you consider how you feel about the author's ideas. So when you look at my examples here, please notice that we do not have the characters' names. We do not have the events from the story, but we have the ideas from the story. Okay? What factors contribute to the growth and acceptance of ourselves and our peers as we get older? So in positive, we talk a lot about fitting in with our peers, treatment of our peers, bullying. These are things that this question leads to. What factors contribute to the growth and acceptance of ourselves and our peers as we get older? Why are people more accepting when they're older than when they're in high school? Or maybe you don't think people are. These are things that we can talk about, but we don't necessarily have to have read positive in order to answer that question. Can one person or action really make a difference? At what point do you give up on a family member or friend when their behavior becomes destructive? Both of these questions lead to our story, Here's to Good Friends. Again, we can answer these questions without having read the text, but if we have read the text, we can draw on those experiences, think about how it was handled in the text, and answer the question from both our own perspective and the character's perspective, the author's perspective. These types of questions are going to make great discussion with your group, especially if you are not reading the same text. Okay? So when we all are not reading the same text, we might say, well, we can't discuss because we all have different books. But you can ask questions of evaluation to your group members and say, okay, my character in my book did this. In real life, I would do this. What do you guys think you would do in this situation? How do you guys think you would deal with a character who acts like this, or a friend who acts like this? And those are questions you can ask your group even if they haven't read the text. So let's talk about your discussion in general. I know we've all done one discussion so far, and we just want to make sure that we're making the most of these discussions, okay? These are graded. You guys hopefully have looked at the week 1 rubric so far. That discussion rubric is going to be the same every single week, so you can see how you progress as we go through this over the next 7 weeks. But let's just talk about some different things that we need to go over to make sure we're making the most of these discussion points in class. So each week you will contribute to a group discussion with the groups you worked in last week. So every week your group is going to stay just about the same. As we continue to work on our question writing, you will be able to actually discuss with your groups even though you aren't reading the same book. You can ask them questions of evaluation and then share your answer, but also give context from your story. So that's what we just talked about with questions of evaluation. So you need to make sure you are actually talking to your peers. This is one of the categories on your rubric for your discussions. It's best practice to have both your camera and mic on so you feel like you are talking to each other and not blank screens. If you have tech issues, your camera's not working, your microphone's not working, you need to get those fixed now. There is a tab on everyone's homepage that says tech support. You can click there, you can send an email and let them know that you need to get a loaner or you need your camera or your microphone fixed, okay? Don't just sit there for weeks on weeks saying, my camera's broken or my microphone is broken. We want you guys to actually feel like you are talking to each other and that you are in a group. So the expectation is you have these things on. Once we start transitioning back to school, you guys will be having these discussions in class, but some of your classmates might still be at home. So your cameras and microphones might be on in class, and then your peers at home will have their cameras and microphones on at home. You want to bring others into the conversation, okay? It's really annoying when 2 people in the group monopolize the entire conversation. So you want to make sure that you're bringing everyone in. I know you guys might not all know each other, but that's kind of the point of these groups, is to branch out, to make friends with some other people, to bring some other people into the conversation. So when you ask those questions of evaluation where your group can participate, please make sure that you're not cutting someone off or you're not only talking to one of your group members who you're comfortable with, but you're really trying to bring everybody together to have that conversation. You always want to go back to the text that is being discussed, okay? So one of the requirements on your rubric is to actually cite a quote from your text and discuss it. That is also one of the requirements on your discussion sheet. You actually have to have 3 per week, 3 passages per week that you found important, but you always want to make sure that you're going back to the text. So when you do ask those questions of interpretation or evaluation, we want to make sure that we're mentioning something about the text when we ask those questions, okay? Questions of evaluation, we can also give our own opinion, but how did we get there? How did we get to that question? What's happening in our book that made us ask that question? That's the point of these discussions, is to talk about the text that you are reading. So you need to show us as your teachers that you are actually reading and that you're making progress in your group or in your book, and that you're bringing that back to your group to discuss. And then again, you can incorporate personal experiences in your prior knowledge. So talking with people who are reading books that you haven't read before, you can incorporate that personal experience. If somebody suggests, oh, my character did this, and here's how I think the book is going to continue, and you have some sort of text to self connection, you can contribute in that way. You could talk about a character that you don't know from a book that you don't know based on your own experiences and prior knowledge. Again, just make sure you're paying attention. This is for a grade. You are getting points for your discussion, how you are contributing to that discussion. So if you guys are like looking down at your phones, clearly doing something else on your Chromebook, looking around, turning your camera off anytime you're not speaking, that's going to be an issue, okay? We wanna make sure you're paying attention and we wanna make sure you're responding to your group members. So please make sure that you are just keeping that in mind as you're contributing to that discussion. You want to offer feedback to your group members, not just good job. Okay, so a lot of you, what I've seen so far is you're falling into the trap of you're going through the checklist for yourself. You're checking off all those boxes. You're giving all of your responses. And then you move on to the next person and there's no discussion. There's no response back to you. And there's no discussion happening. So we want to make sure that we're not just saying good job or okay, I'll go next or okay, somebody else go, and actually engaging in that conversation. So again, that goes with responding to your classmates. Just reading off your sheet in a circle is extremely boring and pointless. So you can ask questions. If you want to know more about your classmates' text, you could ask them a follow-up question. You could ask them random questions. What do you think is going to happen next? Did you like it when the author did this? What would have happened if the author would have changed that and done it a different way? There are questions that you can come up with to engage with your classmates and not just have everybody read what they're supposed to for the checklist that week and then move on. Okay, so I want you guys to keep these things in mind as you are continuing each week. Hopefully the discussions get better each week as we go through multiple different times of participating in these discussions. And the expectation now is that we are really working on those questions of interpretation and questions of evaluation. Again, we want to stay away from those questions of fact because those do not foster discussion. Those are a yes or a no. Those are a one-word answer. Those are an answer we can find in the text. We want to work on questions of interpretation and questions of evaluation on our discussion sheets to make sure that we can have a conversation and a discussion with our group. If you guys have questions, let us know. We can answer those questions for you. Hopefully from here on out, that question portion of your discussion sheet will look a little bit better. And, you know, just go back to those points in this video if you need a refresher at any point. This will stay open in your module, and scroll back to those slides if you need to jot down some notes, but that is the expectation going forward.